Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for coming. We're super excited to be here. We think we've got some really great content to share with you. We want to talk today about how you can use Appscript to create your own AI-driven solutions with Gemini. First thing I want to say is the view from up here is great. I mean, this is a session on Appscript, and the room is absolutely packed. We had over 500 folks sign up for this session, which shows you that Appscript may be one of the best kept secrets I think we may have here in Google Cloud. And so for folks who are actually joining us on the live stream or watching the recording, this room is absolutely full, which is awesome since it's the day after the party event, and it's also on getaway day. So we're super happy you could join us. I don't normally start my sessions with an apology, but I wanted to start with an apology. We have so much information. We have so many cool things to show that we know we're not going to make the 45-minute time limit. So we're going to go a little fast and we're going to cut a little corners. So I'm sorry about that because there's so much good stuff, too much good stuff for us to go through. So what we want you to take away from this session is this is really the beginning of the conversation of how you can use Appscript and AI through Gemini and Vertex to really create some amazing solutions as soon as you leave here today. So that said, there's also a lot of content we want to get through, so let me start with some quick introductions. I'm Charles. I'm a developer advocate here on the Google Workspace developer relations team. Enough about me, that's all you need to know. Joining us in a few moments is going to be Martin Hawksey. Martin Hawksey is a collaboration engineer from CTS out of the UK. Martin, you may know him, has been a Google developer expert for over a decade. Few people know Appscript quite the way Martin does. Martin actually runs a really, really helpful online site called Appscript Pulse. If you're looking to aggregate everything that's new and everything that's going on in workspace development, subscribe and check out Martin's work there. As well as another thing Martin does is he's also the producer and the host of a community show called Totally Unscripted, which every other week breaks down topics on YouTube Live on how you can build solutions with Workspace. So definitely check out Martin's work. Martin's going to come on in a second and tackle a really kind of old-fashioned problem, mail merges, and show you can do that with function calling and change the way you can take that old problem, just make it smarter, better, more intelligent. But next, I'd like to introduce another of the Totally Unscripted co-hosts. And also, Kara Ireland has a very unique perspective on Appscript because she is the tech lead, the tech writer in charge of documentation for Appscript. So obviously she sees it from a different light. She knows it super, super well, of course, and has a great perspective. And the other thing I love to say about it is I don't know anybody who loves Appscript more than Kara. So I really think Kara should kick it off and talk about the magic of Appscript.
Yes, Charles is not wrong. If anybody knows me, you know how much I am passionate about Appscript. And since we are all gathered here today, I'm going to go ahead and assume that we all know and appreciate and love the magic of Appscript. You can leverage the existing functionality of Workspace, your content, your user's context, and create these hyper-customized solutions. And the best part is, nothing about that changes with AI. All we're really doing is bringing all of that exponential power of AI into our workspace solutions. So what does Appscript look like in the AI era? Well, by accessing Gemini through APIs like the Generative Language API or the Vertex API, we can transform our existing Appscript solutions, or we can create totally new ones that wouldn't have been possible before Gen AI. And now, having that programmatic access to your workspace data has never been more valuable. Imagine how you might leverage your documents in Drive, or your emails in Gmail, or your messages in Google Chat to create hyper-customized solutions for your users. And what that really does is it brings user centricity to the next level because you are tailoring your experience to the user's context in ways that were never before possible. And with Appscript, you can facilitate the way that your users access and experience AI by programmatically managing the response from Gemini. With doing this, what you're doing is creating more predictable AI outcomes for your users and a curated AI experience.
So as Kara mentioned, you have a lot of different context within Workspace to create solutions like we couldn't create before. And we're just listing a few of them up here of all the different category types of solutions you can build. Now, some of these you may have been able to do in the past, but in the last 6 months, the power and the capabilities has leaped off the charts exponentially. And so you can take summarization and insights, for example, to a new level in your own custom solutions using the power of Gemini with Appscript. You want to create content or do data analysis. You want to do categorization or organization of content. So, for example, add some labels in your Gmail or help your Drive become way more organized by using AI to arrange that content for you. So it's nearly an endless type of solutions we can build. But as we kind of mentioned already, we're really at the beginning of seeing all these solutions that are capable of being built. We can't wait to see what you start building when you start really applying some of these capabilities. And one of the exciting things, as you know, if you are an experienced Appscript developer, is there's so many different ways you can apply these technologies. We're going to go through some demos in a few moments that shows you how you can use all those different category types and then apply them in kind of the user elements, if you will, the design surfaces to create solutions on Workspace. And so obviously things like custom functions, which by the way, for trivia folks, custom functions is the reason that Appscript was actually introduced many years ago to Workspace. But how do we use like triggers and standalone scripts to automatically run solutions that are AI powered? How do we use our Addon models, both our editor and our Google Workspace ones, to create brilliantly new solutions? We're going to talk a little bit about chat as well too. Chat's a great part of this with the API being very available now with the advanced service. And of course, we're going to actually show a great demo of custom smart chips, which is kind of new and something a lot of folks don't know about yet.
But first, I want to talk a little bit about a little checklist to get started. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice about getting started with this is that it's really not that different to everything you're already doing when you're building on Workspace with Appscript. Adding AI is not that fundamentally different. There are a couple key things, and we'll go over them, but for the most part, everything you already know today is enough to get you started. So the first thing is going to be, you want to design an excellent solution design for your users. Think about how you want to deliver your solution. Like Charles said, will it be a custom function? Will it be an add-on? Do you want to make a standalone automation? You want to make sure that the flow of information in your solution makes the most sense for your use case and your user. The second piece, and arguably the most important, is an effective prompt. You want to make sure that you solicit the most effective prompt to deliver the outcome that you're looking for your users. Now, I'm not going to dive deep into prompt design, but we will show a couple of prompts that have worked for us. And the really cool thing about working within the context of your custom solution is that you're actually sending the prompts to Gemini on behalf of your user. And what's really special about that is most of the solutions you're building will be automating the AI incorporation process into your users' workflows. The next thing, and this might seem easy or even obvious, is the call to the Gemini API models, or the Vertex API models. And it's funny because all we're really doing is calling an API from Appscript just like we would call any other RESTful API. And once you set that up in a function, you can set it, you can forget it, and you're calling your Gemini models just by passing your parameters through the function. Okay, so the next one, a little less obvious. You want to make sure you're planning how you're going to handle the response from Gemini. Maybe you want to do some post-processing once you get the response to make the right outcome for your user. How are you going to handle errors? How are you going to handle some unpredictability? Maybe you get a hallucination. You want to think about how you'll handle that so the user isn't faced with it and they have a smooth experience. And finally, everything you already know about Workspace still applies. Appscript is going to be Appscript, and you're simply adding this new capability of AI into the process. So, before you get started, you do want to ask yourself the following questions. The first one being, does this problem actually need an AI solution? Just because you can build with build with AI doesn't always mean that you should, okay? Adding AI is awesome. And it can also add a little bit of cost, a little bit of time, a little bit of unpredictability. So you want to make sure that your solution will absolutely be more effective once you bring AI into it. Once you realize that it will be,
the other question, and this is just like you would do in solutions in the past, is you want to ask yourself, does Gemini for Workspace, the integrated capabilities that you've heard about so much this week, and actually hopefully been blown away like I have been too, is that already something that's being done? Remember, what we're talking about today are custom solutions tailored to the way that you and your users and your customers work. But obviously, there's no need to reinvent the wheel if there's something out of the box that already works. That said, though, the beauty is, instead of a kind of a vanilla solution, you can really tailor those with your own models, your own prompts, your own way of handling that for your user base. But again, you need to balance that. Should I be coding here when I actually could be using something straight from the product?
Okay, last question. Now, you all know I love Appscript, and it is mighty, but even I can concede that it's not always the best solution for every problem. So what you want to do is make sure that using Appscript will fulfill your requirements for your solution. Okay, how about we actually show some demos and really talk about the reality of using AI?
Let's do that. Let's go to the demo machine. And let me just refresh that up here. And we got a little bit out of control. Let me just refresh this because it went to sleep on me. Let's try it again. Okay, better. Okay, so we want to start off in kind of the beginning here and look at custom functions. So this is a great demonstration of how easily you can bring your user and involve them in the AI process to help them meet their needs. So in this case, we're going to look at, obviously, this data here. I'm just going to pull up a chair if you don't mind, so I can get out here and get a little comfortable. And, imagine I have some information. We've got some ubiquitous data here about product information and ratings, but would it be super nice if I can actually go in and add some AI to learn more about this data? So I'm just going to go off to a second tab where, as a user, I can ask some questions. So for example, I might want to know, what are people saying? What are some negative feedback? How many reviews are we getting? Is anybody taking our product back or returning it? And what's going on? So what I can do real nicely, just like I would with other custom function types, is come in here and I'll say, Gemini, I'm going to actually grab that range. I'll just grab the whole thing. And I'm actually going to make it so it's an absolute reference, because again, I want the ability to just use this like a custom function, just like a normal one. So then when I come over here and say, you know what? I'm just going to take the prompt right out of the cell. And now, right in the cell next to that prompt, I'm going to get back in a second here all those questions that are being done by passing that back to generative AI on the back end. And just like a function, again, I can drag these down. You can see these load up here in a second. You'll notice this actually works fairly well responsively, right? It comes up pretty quickly. You get a little hangover there on the screen. But the neat thing is it's answered those questions super neatly. And so again, I can see things like the number of star reviews. I can even ask questions about how to return a formula in there. I kind of have this whole interface back to AI right from within one of the most common things that users understand, which is a custom function.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great way to give your users an open-ended way to prompt, but you could also front-load that prompt with any additional context that you don't want your users to have to repeat every time they want to prompt with Gemini from their data. Why don't we go into the code and show how simple this was to set up?
So, I hate to say this, but when Kara showed me the solution, Kara built this, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And then I looked at the code and I went, wow, really wasn't that hard, was it?
The magic lasted for about 30 seconds. It was glorious.
But if you look at it here, I'm actually going to get a little more screen size for us. And pull the IDE over. You'll notice that we're just creating a custom function like you would when you're doing this in regular Appscript. So I can see here, my functions range Gemini, you saw it and I called it. I'm simply passing in a range. I'm passing in the user prompt. Then I'm taking that prompt and I'm calling another routine called Gen AI Summary, doing that information. So let me actually go back to that for a second. And a little awkward here, I have to actually move that to make that work, but I want to give you the full screen. Now you'll notice we have one single, simple-ish call to the Gemini model by simply taking that prompt directly from the function. And now we're going to start to assemble that prompt and what we need to pass back. So the first part you can see here is we're passing back the different contents of the prompt And again, very simply in this case, we're taking the entire contents of that cell, assembling it here in the JSON object called data, and then we start to create the rest of the prompt. So for example, we can add the advanced AI settings like the temperature or the max output tokens. And this is a great example where maybe you want to throttle output just because you can call large models today. Maybe you don't want that heavy, slower chatter coming back if you don't need those longer answers, so you can actually scale that. You can add safety settings. So if you're working in EDU or something like that, that may be important to you. But now here's kind of the part that does all the magic. So we're assembling all that together. You can see we're going to do a post method using the URL fetch. We take our content type. It's going to be obviously all in JSON. We stringify our payload. We plop in an API key. Now, we've got the API key hidden away here nicely on our script property. We fetch that out, and then we simply do a URL fetch. So we make that external call. You can see we're calling the generative language API.
Yes, actually, I do want to make a point about that. With a custom function, it's important to note that custom functions don't support user authorizations. So you can't actually use Vertex API if you're building a custom function with Gemini. You want to use the generative language API for this.
Awesome. And so then when the response comes back, we get that payload, we parse it out, we pull the text back that we get the response from Gemini, and obviously return that to our calling function, which blasts it in the cell. And you can see we can copy it down hundreds of times, and it does it super fast. So this is amazing and easy at the same time. You'll impress your friends and colleagues. Frankly, it's not that hard.
Don't show them the code. Otherwise
don't show them the code. Thank you. All right, so moving along and moving faster, we're going to pick up a little speed here because we need to make it up in the air. But we want to show another scenario where we can combine using an editor add-on, this time inside of Google Sheets, and allow you to actually do a bulk process, which is what we love to do with Workspace, automate some things. So say, for example, you've got a bunch of content sitting in your files and drive somewhere, and instead of opening all that content, maybe you want to categorize it like I mentioned earlier, you want to summarize it, you want to get some insights about it. You can simply, as we do in this demo, select the different files we want to work on. I'll just pick 2 here to see if it goes a little faster. Then I can even add additional prompts. And this is one of the neat things that Kara mentioned. You may, because this is Workspace after all, want to involve the user in the customization process here. Have them add prompts. Or in some cases, again, depending upon your user base, be able to set things like the temperature or the output token limit. And you can see how nicely you can present this here inside this editor add-on so folks can control that while we're working it. But I'm not going to bother with that. I'll take the standard defaults. I'm just going to run this. Now, while it runs, it does take a moment. So ignore the one that's running. I'm going to do a little Julia Childs here and flip over to the one that's already working. Trust this, it works. Notice it comes back. It allows us to get things like the word count. It gets things like a summarization of the document. We even, in the original demo, put some additional custom prompts so we could get different flavors of those responses and parse all this information and get all this great response just by automating a spreadsheet, as you saw here. So let's see if that came back yet. The answer is it hasn't. We'll talk about that in a second. It does take a few seconds here, and there's some key things you need to think about. Okay, but let's move on for time's sake to the next one. This may be my favorite one. So real quick, the last one was created by one of our other tech writers named Nathan Gammy. I wanted to shout out to Nathan for building that. This next one's really important that I shout out who built it. Super neat. My boss, Steve Basil, built it. He's not only a phenomenal developer and a wonderful human being, and I hope he remembers this for perf time, but this is actually really super cool. So what we're going to show in this demo, I'm going to kick it off right now, and then I'll explain what's happening. So this shows how you can use multimodal calls to Gemini to do some neat things. So in this case, what we want to do is treat, oh, it came out pretty fast, I love it. Treat this slide as an image, and we're asking it to rate how effective this slide is. And so if you think about this, you're building slides all the time. This is actually one of the slides in our deck, and we got a nice little score back here. It takes, the way they, not perfect scores, it takes the slide as an image. We make a compound prompt where we take the slide notes to help Gemini understand a little better what's being asked of it. And then it, as you see, responds back and gives us a summary of what the slide's about. It gives us a score on simplicity, color, structure and white space, and we got an overall score. It's a 90, so we're a B plus student, I guess.
That tracks. But this is all stuff that we've pre-programmed into the prompt. So if you're a marketing team or any sort of team that has brand guidelines and things that you want people to while they're developing their decks, you can easily put this in. They can do a first review with Gemini before they send it off for final review with the team.
Yeah, this is the exact prompt, obviously thrown in a slide. But if you look at it real quickly, it follows the rules of prompt design where it says, here's your task. I want to provide constructive feedback on our presentation. I want to state the main message of the slide, breaking the tasks down in order for each of the following categories as listed. I want to evaluate each given slide, even tells about the scoring, comes through and tells what those criteria are. And then the most important part here at the end, by the way, format the response as markdown with headers, bullets, and new lines. Be very explicit about what you want, because as a programmer, when you return that back, not only will it be more predictive and replicable, you also can parse this real easy and just pass it back to the side panel like you saw that we did. So super cool stuff. We are going to make sure we share these. This sample is already up on GitHub. We didn't get time to get them all, but we're going to promise to make sure we get them all available super soon. Let's move on to the next one. And again, picking up a little more speed. This is one of my favorite, not just because I wrote it, but the use case is me. I admit this. I am the person that creates documents all the time to take notes, and then I look back at the end of the day and I have 15 documents called untitled document. And of course, I'd like to get rid of those because that's not good housekeeping. So I wrote a simple drive add-on, and I called it Name with Intelligence. So as soon as I click on a file, what I'm doing with my add-on here is I'm getting the body of this document, sending it to Gemini AI. I've asked for a summary, so I don't have to open the document and read it. I asked specifically for 3 great names. It comes up with a couple of those great names. And again, without opening the document or doing anything, I can just say, you know what, this is a great document called Unlocking the Power of Google Appscript. And I love it. And look, it just renamed it. Thank you. Wow. My other absolute favorite feature is if I click through some of these and Gemini goes, you know what, this document is not very interesting. Boom. Goodbye. Love it. Okay, so that's a drive add-on, moving faster. Let's talk about one of the neat things is taming your inbox. So here we have a add-on for Gmail. And so again, not going to go through it all, so it takes a little bit of time, but the first, earthquake. The first use case is, imagine you're in customer service and you obviously get, emails sent to you from your customers, and you want to make sure that you're answering in a timely format. We use Gemini AI to go through and categorize and do a sentiment analysis of content in your inbox. So if I was to run the demo in full, and again, for time's sake, not going to, I can simply say, pick full inbox or day or week or whatever. Obviously, as a developer, you can manage that and control that, giving the best user for experience. And it automatically went through and passed the body of these email items. It did a sentiment analysis on that content, then returned to the inbox, and there you go, great laser pointer there. It actually came back and actually gave me a visual highlight as a label so I could quickly point to the file the email that could be a problem, so I can figure out why Jeffrey is not super happy. So again, I get the context of this file. One of the neat things you can do with custom solutions is not just use your workspace content. In this case, we're going to go and triage the content inside of Jira, which is where we manage our customers, to figure out, hey, what's going on here? So again, without me having to leave workspace, without me having to go and open all the tickets, we use Jira's API to pull the content back, synthesize it, summarize it, do a sentiment analysis on it inside of our add-on, and then you came back here and you can quickly see, with the cool little smiley faces, this situation's not a problem, but here Jeffrey and Kyra, who's responding to Jeffrey, weren't super happy, and Charles Maxson received an escalation over the weekend and has not been able, wait, this is about me.
You're the problem, you said it last.
Wow, okay. But now the neat thing is, without having to do a lot of work, again, using AI to make another call, I'm gonna take the content of those Jira tickets, I'm going to create content that obviously starts to apologize and allows me to remediate this problem. So you can see how the workflows become easier, a lot less for users to actually have to manage this. And so some really great things you can do in use cases there. Let's move on to another one. And again, I'm not going to run this one live just because of time's sake, but it's super, super neat. I'll explain it to you. So this is written by Justin on our team. And one of the great use cases here is if you think about how teams manage communication with each other inside a chat. Chat can get chatty. So Justin wrote a great Appscript project that allows us to collect our stand-up information, the tasks that you worked on, the things that you did, and then share it with the team. So you can see here, for example, Ken's put a couple of his great updates that he's working on, but no offense, I don't want to, as a manager, go and read through everybody's comments every week. I love to get this summarized. So the way this works, all this runs by triggers. So the initial main message, the top thread, simply runs once a week on a Tuesday for us and says, put in your updates. Nice and simple, great reminder, everybody responds it. Everybody then replies in line to their own threads and puts them all in there. And then we have yet another trigger running an Appscript, which every hour, and again, you could make this as necessary as you need, we do it every hour where it takes all of these threads using the advanced service of the chat API, passes the entire subthreads off to Gemini, and then says in our prompt, give us one line per user to take as many things as they put in there and make it readable. So I don't have to read through everybody's bragging about all the great things they accomplished.
Look at how productive I was.
My favorite feature is, again, since we're doing this through the chat API, I can, and we add it here, simply click the view thread, which each time this runs, it moves you through the entire chat space to allow you to go to last week's and the weeks before and the weeks before. So again, as a manager, as a viewer of the folks on the team, I can manipulate this quickly and take all the chatter away and find what folks are working on. Super cool stuff. Yeah. Actually also fairly super easy. Okay, home stretch. Last one, best one, because Kara wrote it. Talk about it.
Yes, so this demo actually uses one of our latest ways to extend the Workspace UI, which is something called a link preview. And you can do link previews in Docs, Sheets, and Slides. What we've done here is a link preview for Google Docs that takes links from our developer documentation site and converts them into smart chips in a Google document. So once a user hovers over the chip, we provide them with a generated summary of the page using Gemini. Now, this is great because when you have information that you want to include in a doc via links, whoever's reading those documents can get the gist of information they need without leaving the context of the document that they're in. We've also added some interactivity to the link preview. So let's say we experience some unpredictability. The user can say, oh, you know what, this summary isn't that great. And when a user clicks that not great thumbs down button, it will ask Gemini to generate a brand new summary. We can also get feedback saying, hey, you know what, that looks good, love your work. But what this does, oh yes, exactly. But what we don't want to do is generate a summary every single time someone hovers over this link. I mean, think about how many documents might use the same link from our documentation, or how many people in a document might be viewing that link preview. So what we're actually doing is every time Gemini generates the summary, we're storing it in Firestore as a document related to that exact link. But if we do get that bad rating, we also delete the stored summary, and then we generate the new one and save the new one. Now, that's another important thing to think about when you're calling Gemini API. Where can you be more efficient? Where can you cache things so that you don't have to call it every time someone wants to use your solution?
With that, why don't we bring up Martin to solve the age-old problem? How do you actually make better mail merges? And let's check out.
Yeah, let's see a real demo.
Gemini.
Let's get off the stage.
Thank you. And we are live. Wrong gig, sorry. So let's go to the next.
Back to the slides,
yeah,
please.
We need to get back to the slides.
So I will go back a bit. Yeah, so as Charles mentioned, I've been working in Google Appscript for quite a while. This is a very old photograph, aged quite a bit since then. So I work for a Google partner. I work for CTS Apps Broker. It's probably the largest Google dedicated partner in Europe. And the advantage of that is I get to work in a workspace department. So I get to work with other workspace engineers and essentially follow my passion. So my passion actually started way back, as Charles kind of hinted at, in 2010. And the thing that really got me started was, and if you can find it, there is this great launch video for Google Appscript by Jonathan Rochelle with a mail merge. And when there was a couple of years ago, when there was an opportunity to actually contribute to the Google developer documentation, I immediately put my hand up and said, let's do a mail merge. So you may have come across this. Hands up if you've come across this sample. Quite a few people, yeah. I wish I had $1 for every page view this page got, because I wouldn't be here. I'd be in the casino right now. Anyway, I'm going to forget that. So this is one way that you can do a mail merge. And what you're hopefully getting the idea of is with Gemini, we've got new opportunities in terms of the way that we approach stuff. So now we can actually start looking at things like personalized mail merges. So I'm going to show you an example of how you can do this. So again, using the Gemini API. So here we have a Google Sheet, very typical. We've got some data in that Google Sheet. And we've got some Appscript code. So not a huge amount of code here, 45 lines, and one single prompt. So when this script runs, everything else happens automatically. So we're generating individual draft emails based on the topics that our contacts are interested in. So this is slightly different in terms of the approach that Charles and Cara have been talking about, where you've been engineering prompts, passing those, using the context that you've got within Google Workspace, and getting a response back. What we're doing here is actually using something called function calling. Hands up if you've heard of function calling before. Yeah, so this is the next stage up from prompt design. So you're still in that, I think, wonderful position of when you're using the Gemini API with very simple prompt design, you're paying for what you use and when you use it. Function calling is exactly the same. You're paying for what you use and when you use it. But what we're doing is we're extending the capabilities of Gemini to very personalized, very specific use cases. And I think this is incredibly important in the case of Appscript, because if you're familiar with Appscript, you're creating projects and you're running those as the user. So immediately you're into sheets, you're into docs, you're into slides, you're able to do stuff. With function calling, we can run those functions on behalf of the user. So in terms of what we're putting into Gemini, we're just declaring the functions that we have in our Appscript project. So Gemini isn't actually running those functions for us. So in terms of this is the simplified schematic. Charles almost didn't let me have this slide in here. He said it's far too complicated. But let me just quickly kind of describe what we've got going on here. So at the top, similar to the way that Charles described in terms of generating a JSON payload that we send into Gemini, we do the exact same thing. But as part of that, we're declaring some functions that we want to use. As part of those function declarations, we're saying the parameters that those functions require, and you can see that there. We're actually using the description of those parameters and the function's name. They all form part of our prompt. So this is informing Gemini in terms of what we want to do. So in terms of this whole process, we're declaring our functions, we're declaring our text. In this particular example, we've got two functions. We're getting contacts list and we're drafting email messages. When we kick off this whole process, it then becomes a back and forth between Gemini and our script in terms of executing this. So it's one execution. We get the results back from our Google Sheet. We pass that back into Gemini. Gemini interprets that data, decides whether or not we should be calling this draft email function, which we then run locally. We then take any response we get back from that function, put it back into Gemini, and so on and so on, which sounds all really quite complicated. And fortunately, we've simplified it. So I've created, from community contributions, we've created a Google Appscript library that you can get your hands on today. The really nice thing about this library is it's not just for function calling. So you no longer have to do all this JSON payloads, parameter stuff. You could have just used the library.
You have it ready.
Well, guys.
You have it ready in time.
The other nice thing about this, so Charles and Cara have talked about going from Google AI Studio to using Vertex AI within Google Cloud Project. With this library, you can go from prototype to the production with only changing a couple lines of code for your configuration. And the final thing, and the important thing, is it incorporates function calling. So there's a whole new world that you can explore. And you'll see, if you go to that link, you can start seeing some of the documentation examples. And I hope you have a lot of fun. And happy scripting.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin. Great job. Okay, so hopefully by now you've gained some inspiration from these demos, especially Martin's. I can't wait to think about how I might use function calling for something like a chat app. But what we'd like to do now is share some things that we've all learned along the way. And we're calling these better practices because best practices for Appscript are still evolving. This is a rapidly changing space. And even while we were developing this content, things kept changing while we were creating this deck. So AI best practices, they're still forming, but the best thing you can do is pay attention to what the community is doing, learn from each other. But yeah, let's talk about some things.
Okay, so probably not a surprise. One of the most important things you need to do is figure out how do you craft prompts that are going to engineer solutions to make them work predictively. Now, the great thing is there's no secret sauces. Again, it's not like a broken record here, but there's nothing unique you need to learn about this, with maybe a couple of caveats. But for the most part, it's just like when you were using Gemini itself inside a workspace, you can do it. By the way, just real quick, if you haven't checked it out yet, there is a downloadable book that talks about specifically how do you build prompts for Workspace. Actually, a great, useful guide to get started if you haven't thought about it. But honestly, the book wasn't available when we built these demos, or the folks we worked with did. And to be honest, doing the prompt design actually wasn't that hard once we knew what we wanted to do, what we were asking for. So the rules make sense. You obviously want to have, natural language, clear wording, like we said, be specific. You definitely want to follow that formula, the setting or persona, some people refer to it as, the context, the tasks, and most importantly, I think, is the format. The other thing, building these, again, this is Appscript. The beautiful thing about Appscript is you can quickly try these things and run them until you get them right. Iterate, run it all over again. Remember, the goal here, though, is to use that context of content in your user's workflow experience. You saw how we used email, we used chat, we used docs, whatever. Use that as part of your content, even doing things like imageries. And the other thing, and the great thing, determine whether or not you want to include or mask your users in the prompt design as well, too.
Let me look at an example.
So just to show you, again, we showed you a kind of big ugly one earlier. It was kind of long. This is actually the one that does the untitled Name with Intelligence demo. Real quick, if you look at it, actually very, very simple. So we have two tasks. Remember I mentioned we wanted 3 names for our documents. We wanted to create a summary of the content, very explicit. I want 2 to 3 sentences. The most important part for me as a developer is I said, format that response as a JSON object. And I was very explicit here. I want the first field called names and the summary field called summary. Therefore, when I got back that payload, I could parse it every single time and not have to deal with errors I didn't want to find out from my users later. And then the final part of the actual context is I simply took the entire content of those docs or those slides and passed them straight off to that. So that's how simple they can actually be. All right, so what does AI actually introduce to Appscript? And Karen mentioned this a bunch of times. Not a lot changes. It's simply another library type that you're calling that, like you've done in the past. If you've used URL fetch, and a lot of folks probably have, the complexity is not that hard, as you saw. But as we saw preparing these demos and trying to show them in a short period of time, you do have to allot for things like the processing time. You also have to know, for example, like you have longer running processing time in an editor add-on than you do inside of the window of a workspace add-on. So again, some of your decisions may be based upon some of those nuances of what you're trying to do. Karen mentioned this as well too, different error types. The worst thing we want to do is send back nasty errors to our users who would lose faith in our AI solutions if we get back, invalid or content not found or some sort of errors. Good thing there is, obviously we need to also work with the limits. Just because you can send 1 million tokens doesn't mean you should be. We also know that, again, Appscript is still Appscript. Those quotas still apply. We mentioned cost, and again, you have to weigh that. One of the great things that Kara talked about already is how do you actually only call when you need to call? Now, we built these demos and assembled these and tried these over a period of like 4 days and ran them hard. The entire cost was 4 cents. So, that may work. And then the other thing to expect, one of the things is these things will change. And so you probably are going to do a little more maintenance and review of your solutions as obviously these large language models evolve over time. So that's what it introduces.
Well, I'm going to wrap things up, I think. We're running out of time. But I do want to say, once again, and I don't know if I've said this enough, the heart of it is the basics about Appscript still exist. The guidelines that we shared are things that you're all already thinking about today. Now we are just thinking about them more as we bring AI into the solution. So like Charles said, you want to cache what you can, you want to manage quotas, you want to manage your errors. You want to use modularity in your solution development. That will save you time, it will save you money. And of course, managing your API keys, figuring out whether you're going to use a standard or default cloud project. These are all things you already know and love. And honestly, I can't remember a time when integrating such a pivotal new solution into an existing ecosystem was this approachable and this straightforward. So with that, we encourage you to go put the practice in best practices. Learn what you can, share what you've learned. The beauty of this new era is that we're all in this together. We're all adapting to this shift, and there is so much more to uncover. We invite you to continue your learning journey. We've got, of course, the Workspace developer documentation site. We've got the awesome YouTube developers channel that our teammate Chanel runs and is excelling at. And of course, Martin, Appscript Pulse, can't live without it. And shameless plug, join us on Totally Unscripted where we do talk more in depth about these things.
In just 1 minute while I can, as I still see time left. As an Appscript developer, on behalf of Kara and the entire tech writing crew, our documentation is stunning and stellar. So thank you guys for all you do. It's amazing. But please join us, and as we close every episode of Totally Unscripted, Martin, what do we say?
Happy scripting!
Thank you so much.